Hello, my name is Richard Collins. I'm a member of Above Bar Church. Thanks for joining me for Stories in Lockdown. Today I'm joined by Keith Brown and Matt Bunday. Professor Keith Brown is the director of the National Centre for Post-Qualifying Social Work and Professional Practice at Bournemouth University. He is both an authority on social work throughout the UK and a prolific author with over 30 books to his name. He advises various government departments on social work policy. Keith, it's great to have you with me today.
My absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Keith. Also with me is Matt Bunday. Matt became a councillor last year and is now the secretary of the Southampton Labour group of 30 councillors. His particular areas of interest include finance, culture, and the Green City Charter. Matt teaches in higher education. He teaches event management and tourism. Matt, good to have you with me today.
Thank you.
So, first of all, where do you both live?
I live in Bitton Park, near the Triangle, and which has been really useful for lockdown because we have the park nearby and we can get out for daily walks. And the ward I represent is Swaveding, so I'm literally over the bridge and it's quite close, so I can get over there regularly.
And I live up in Bassett by the golf course, and it's to be like Matt, it's quite useful in lockdown because you can walk around the golf course.
Very nice. How long have you both been attending Above Bar Church?
Oh, I'll go first.
Yeah.
My family have been attending Above Bar for just over 12 years now.
I got involved in 2013. I grew up as as a Christian in a family, and stepped away from it for a few years, and called me back in 2013.
Okay, so I'd like to know a little bit about your work life. What was your work life like before lockdown? What kind of things were you up to?
Oh yeah.
What would you, Matt? Go ahead.
Okay. So I split my time between event organising and teaching and being a counsellor. This worked quite well in terms of the different seasons because doing events is more summer and spring, and of course academia is more autumn, winter, spring. And I was elected last year in May, so then I tried to kind of ease back on the events and the teaching a bit, so I could become a counsellor. And really enjoy that. Then, of course, a general election came up in November, December, and I stood in a ward in Hampshire, in a CLP in a constituency in Hampshire. So that took up a lot of time. But I would sort of split my work three ways, really. But I was trying to move into the element of teaching and politics. And then it all happened in February.
Are you travelling around a lot then, teaching at these different universities?
Yeah, so I'm what you call an associate lecturer. So I get engaged by different universities per term almost. So currently I'm at the University of Surrey. I was doing stuff at the University of West London, and I was doing some work at a drama school in London. So those three places. But previously I've done stuff at Solent and at Winchester, London Met, and that's good for me because it varies each term. So if you have a particularly heavy term, particularly heavy few months in terms of events or politics, I can maybe do a fewer hours. And I'm one of those people that quite likes the commuting. I mean, and working away from home and seeing new places. So I would sort of go to Kent and to London and be very happy. So this lockdown's been particularly challenging in a way because, of course, I've been at home for 12, 14 weeks doing it all off of a laptop. So it's definitely been a bit of a change. But yes, I used to greatly enjoy working in London around the place and drive to Surrey regularly and things. So.
Thanks, Matt. What about you, Keith? What does your work life look like?
Well, as you introduced me, so I'm both a professor and also the director of the National Centre. So the sort of roles and tasks that we have about 1,000 postgraduate students a year from all over the country, doctors, nurses, social workers, and we provide sort of specialist high-level work in mental health, mental capacity, child protection work, some leadership and management work. So that's kind of the day job, keeping that educational centre running. As a researcher, I lead 2 research teams. So I personally lead the national research into fraud and scamming, which you hear a lot about on the news. So I work with the head of economic crime in London, the national scams teams, and I've led that work now for 5 or 6 years. And I also have another research team looking at end-of-life care and mental capacity. So I've got 2 research teams, an educational department to run, and then I used to spend probably 1 or 2 days a week, primarily in Whitehall, advising ministers at sort of senior government level. And I've now probably I'm on my 6th or 7th Home Secretary, for example.
Wow.
Sounds like for both of you, your jobs took you kind of all over the country. So what's it been like for both of you under lockdown? Matt, what about you?
It's been really nice in a way. I've because I'm doing a master's in September. My sort of journey took me back home for a few months over this year, so I could save a bit of money for that. But that happened just before the lockdown, so I'm sort of fortunate to be living with my parents a bit. So there's some kind of some nice quality family time we wouldn't have had there. It's been sort of quite hard to make yourself go out each day and to go out regularly. When it was quite intense back in February and March time, and we, from the council point of view, we were trying to get mutual aid groups set up and things like that, and doing lots of things for the first time. You'd have 9-10 hours stretched in front of a laptop, as well as recording lessons and marking and things. So it's been a real culture shock in that way. I'm not one that is naturally an individual exerciser. I like my team sports, my hockey, my football, grouping, cycling as a group, etc. So that's quite hard work to go out, get some fresh air. So it's definitely been different, but I think it's also trying to make sure the time is quality. I think it's important to look back on the lockdown, after the lockdown, and go, what did I do and was it helpful? So when I've not been working, I've tried to do some reading to get ready for my masters and try and kind of evolve my wider picture, really. Try not to just sit watching Netflix all day, as tempting as that might be. But yeah, it's definitely going to be difficult to get used to. Me and my family have had to sort of work out how we work in different parts of the house. And Mum's downstairs, I'm upstairs in the office, and when I have phone calls and things like that, and we got our internet upgraded. So it's definitely been interesting. I'm sort of hoping that the new normal will include some kind of mixture of both. I used to go in 2-3 times a week to the civic centre, and I've been in sort of once in 6 months. So
that you've actually been working more hours because of lockdown, or has the work tapered back a bit?
I think it's probably been slightly more because I haven't had to travel, and I felt, well, I really want to get this thing done because it's important and it needs to be done today. And I've not had to drive or travel. I think I've used my car twice in 5 months. I had to turn it on every other week to check the batteries. Okay. So it's been more intense time in a way, and that's been sort of good mentally. I've been able to focus and then kind of switch off for the evening. When I do switch off, I manage to completely switch off and not worry about it. But I think, it's been quite intense in a way. And I think quite often, Keith will have different examples of this, I'm sure, but when the lockdown hit, quite a lot of stuff changed very quickly, and actually suddenly everything became quite, we had to be quite accurate, and from a local kind of community point of view, I was aware that if I got this wrong, it may, worst case, mean that someone didn't get fed tonight, or someone didn't get the support that they needed. And not because anything was going wrong on our end, but just because we have to do so much stuff for the first time and having to change everything. So I think that got to me a bit. There's quite a lot of kind of intense emails and phone calls and things.
Thanks, Matt. What about you, Keith? I know you work long hours, heavy responsibility. Have you been working a little bit more, a bit less? How has your work changed over the past few months?
I think apart from periods of really high activity, so I've been on the NHS Safeguarding Emergency COVID Forum, and many of the people listening to this will have listened to number 10 briefings in the evening. So I've been providing the research behind that, doing some work behind that. So there have been times of pretty high intensity, but generally speaking, I've probably had slightly less work because I've not had my team to manage, and a lot of the day-to-day stuff they've got on and done it. So it's just been very, very different. I think what I'm conscious of, though, is that the hard yards over the years of getting to know people and getting trusted by politicians meant that I was able to operate in lockdown. I would not have been able to operate the way I have unless the systems and the structures and the trust had been built up over a couple of decades. You can't just rock up on a Zoom call and start changing government policy. The hard yards are the hard bit. So overall, probably slightly fewer hours, but I've written 5 sets of government guidance, a national paper on fraud, and got a new textbook launched out while we've been on lockdown. So what's hard work? I don't know.
I think what people might be interested in, especially since both of you are interacting with government, whether it's locally or nationally, I think we'd really like to know, what is the atmosphere out there in the nation as you interact with those in government? What does it feel like out there? What's changed? Have there been any changes in the way in which government is being done?
Yeah, I'm interested in Matt's comments about the need for accuracy and speed. It feels to me that there's been 2 seasons in lockdown. And the first season was not quite panic, but, this is completely unprecedented. We heard that word all the time. It's unprecedented, it's unprecedented. Of course, what that did is it gave a real sense of urgency, and many things speeded up. So we were able to get policy change and legislative guidance out, legal guidance out very quickly. And I was being asked to do things very, very quickly. So for example, around Easter time, you started to pick up stories about care homes and blanket do not resuscitate notices and people being left alone in those sorts of situations. Well, in the space of a week and a half, I wrote the NHS guidance on advanced care planning to reiterate what the law was. And within 24 hours, Matt Hancock's on TV reminding everybody that blanket DNRs are illegal and can't be done. Well, I'd have never done that in the past. Literally within 10 days, I'd written the whole strategy, put it together. In 24 hours, I've got the Secretary of State using my words on TV. The second season, as in the last couple of months, that's been very different. And now I'm in a situation, I feel, certainly with central government. Because remember, central government is not so much just about the politicians, it's about all the civil servants and all the backdrop of Whitehall. And because most of those people are working from home, there's chaos, basically. There's not the proper IT systems out there. People aren't, people have left the buildings without computer systems. And actually now it's gone from super fast to super slow. And lots of the problems in central government now, and some of the departments I'm working with, is actually trying to speed things back up to a normal level of speed. So we've got from a situation where in an emergency, in an unprecedented time, you could bring things about and make changes very rapidly. Now everyone's gone back to what I call super cautious, and we're almost waiting for the new dawn before we start working again.
Yeah, I'd echo some of that. I think there's probably 2 points I'd make from local government. One is that in the early days, Keith mentioned the first season, I think that there's something called the Civil Contingencies Act 2004 comes in, which people know all about probably a lot more than me. But I think like that sort of splits our focus a bit, or not splits, that kind of refocuses us a bit to saying it's now more about kind of cabinet and front benchers and senior officers making the decisions and getting going, and backbenchers like me being aimed at the community a bit more. So we found ourselves in the early days sort of setting up communication channels in the community. So I would get updates from kind of the various kind of structures at the council. This is what we're doing. This is what's going on. This is what we've closed. This is what we've opened. And then getting them out to comms almost on the same day as soon as I could, really. I think, and I'm not just saying this because some of them may kind of look at this. I think the officers have generally been brilliant. I think an awful lot of stuff has had to change and work fast, and like I said, fast and accurate. and it's generally been done very well. And they've been open to kind of backbenchers like me who occasionally says, well, actually, are we doing all we can in this area? Do we maybe want to look at it? And they're going, okay, fair, yeah, no, okay. And actually that's led to kind of better working. So I think the officers have been brilliant, and the leadership is, from local council, Keith's right, we move very fast with some things. And there's been, kind of the hotline set up and things like that. In terms of people, you mentioned about kind of how that's been perceived. I think that there's been one thing that's been remarkable to see has been some of the community resilience and support. I think this is one of the kind of byproducts of this has been you've seen the communities around the city that have really well come together, which has been almost like, almost tear-jerking, because within sort of 2-3 days of the lockdown, you had these mutual aid groups set up. You had leaflets through people's doors saying, if you are self-isolating, if you are in trouble, call us and we'll help you. And that's brilliant, when people go down the road and smile at each other and stuff. So I think we've not had any negative feedback as far as I can see about council and services and stuff. We have been able to do stuff very quickly. It's been great to see some of the officers working with it. So yeah, I think I answered the question.
So, what are the major challenges that you face being a Christian in the workplace? Keith, what's it like for you being a Christian? How does that express itself in your workplace?
Do you mean in the workplace generally or during COVID?
I was wondering that.
Being a Christian is a whole life thing, so it expresses itself whether there's lockdown or not. But yeah, either will do.
So clearly I have to deal with some pretty sensitive and some tricky and difficult areas. So, some of my meetings are held completely off record, sometimes very early in the morning, breakfast meetings at 7:30 in Whitehall, so I'm on the first train possible. Some of my meetings are held in the Bank of England, literally inside a Faraday cage, so that there are no telephone signals and no listening devices going on, because we're dealing with serious and organised crime. And why I'm telling you that is because it's not about being a Christian. It's about being somebody who's respected as an authority that gets me there. And I often say I'm not a Christian leader. I'm a leader who happens to be a Christian. I want to be listened to by politicians or anybody in government because they trust my opinion. They trust my position. They trust what I've got to say. And I hope in doing that, as a Christian, I'm representing God in that, if that makes sense. And therefore, my difficulty is sometimes when historically or at any time, Christians are saying things that are sometimes a little bit unhelpful, getting a bit dramatic, lobbying very hard as Christians. It can therefore be quite difficult to be associated with other Christians, because if you're not careful, you're just dismissed and you're ignored. I'm probably not making sense of you, but the wisdom that you've got to have to be considered in your opinion, to be thoughtful in your opinion, to be accurate in your opinion, and actually to not just have an opinion, but to have some evidence to back up what you're saying, so that you're not just banging a view or banging an opinion or banging the Bible on a politician's desk. They are world experts at seeing lobbying. They can listen to lobbyists and actually pay no attention at all to what they're saying, because that's what's going on all the time. And what I've discovered is that politicians, the thing they most want is integrity and honesty. And people whom they can ask the difficult questions of, get honest answers and not be dropped in it, if that makes sense. So in other words, there are many things that I do that I can't ever talk about or even mention, even to you folks in church. But what I love about it is being the Christian voice that's respected and valued, that can be there. So it's about providing leadership that happens to be Christian.
Yeah, I know. I'd agree with all that. I think that so I've attended. I'm currently doing the Evangelical Alliance kind of public leadership course. I agree with everything you said. When I was on the ballot for the general election and with the local election, I was not the Christian candidate, but I wasn't hiding my Christian values. So my Twitter says that I'm a Christian, and I go to church, and people ask me out on doorstep. A few people said, "Is he a Christian?" I said, "Yes, I go to that church, that big one in town above Trespass." So I think that's important, and people start to think about that and go, well, actually, he's showing integrity, he's showing care and compassion for other people, he's a Christian. And I think that's a really good frontline story. I'd expand the answer out a bit and say one of the bits I struggle with is not being able to help everyone. From an event management point of view, I'm used to problem solving. Someone says, be this, we need to do this in 10 minutes time. Okay, if it's physically possible, we'll make it happen. And I've built a good team around me over the years, so I know that I got a better than even chance to making it happen. But with a council, you can't help everyone. And when I first moved into the kind of council local authority, I was sort of like, I was like, I want to do great things here. And I'm still optimistic about that. But I think I've learned to believe a bit that actually sometimes we physically can't do that. And it's really hard when you see statistics for COVID and you see some problems there, I think. So.
What do you think, this is kind of my last question, which has to do with really over the last 2-3 months, what you've experienced and learned about God during this period of lockdown that might be, I guess, an encouragement to those watching.
Shall I go first with that? So I think although he'll give us great challenges, he'll give us solutions and he'll give us optimism from that. I think it's obviously been a horrible 6-7 months for everyone. But we are seeing some really kind of, like I said, some really optimistic things come from it. Local communities, bigger green agendas, and I think that is his doing as much as everything. And I've always believed that he sort of never gives you more than you can handle. I think even the most sort of intense time in February, March time, when I was trying to balance taking all my lessons online to having all my event work disappear over the course of 10 days, to trying to sort of help with the comms and things like that, there was still optimism, and there was still people around me who randomly popped up to help. And I think that is useful.
What about you, Keith?
For me, I think, I know this doesn't sound a bit trite or a bit simplistic, but I do want to say it. God is in control. And, I look back on the last few months and think, I became a Christian when I was 12. And in my teenage years, I felt a great calling to work with the marginalised and the poor. And my whole life, that's what I've been doing. And the last 20 years, I've run the last 10 years, the National Centre. And there have been days I've been thinking, and, I'm approaching 60 now, and, the latter part of my career, there have been days that I've been thinking, actually, the last 45 years, God has been preparing me to be able to speak into these specific situations. And that's genuinely happened on quite a few occasions in the last few months. And I thought, blimey, I needed to be around for all those years, doing all those things, writing all those books, doing all those degrees, doing all that work to be credible for today. And that's God's plan. He knew me way back then, and he knew what I was up. Does that make sense? And I think you've just got to take comfort that God is in control. He's an infinite God. He's a massive God. He's in charge of the whole universe. And at times when we get really stressed and anxious, and we've all been stressed and anxious about COVID and what it means and the changing of the world, and it's not that pleasant at times, he is bigger than COVID.
Mm-hmm. No, I just agree with that really quickly if I can. The last few years, some of the big experiences that I've had, some of the big good, bad times that I've had, some of the big jobs that I've done, it's very clear to me now that actually that was part of the preparation. And situations where I wouldn't have been able to cope with 3 years ago, had I been a councillor 3 years ago, or had I run for Parliament 3 years ago. So yes, I agree with all that.
And so God is in control, and he is certainly bigger than COVID. And that's a really good word for us as we finish, Keith. So thank you, Keith. Thank you, Matt, for being with me today. It's been fantastic to have an insight into your lives and to hear about what you've been learning and contributing so much during lockdown, what God has been up to in our city and in our country. And to those watching, if you found this video on the Above Bar Church website, there will be more stories in lockdown available during the next few weeks. Bye for now.